I'm not the only person. I can't hear anything. No.
We are on break.
You are not the only person.
Time
We
is
are on
even
break.
up.
We are on break.
Okay,
My break
thank you
time is
very
over.
much. Thank you.
Break is over, so we are coming to continue. All right, so welcome back from the short break. Um, so before we went on break, someone asked a question about something that I mentioned to you, and whether whether questions will be set on that. And I mentioned that I can't tell, but you should note that information to consider it as general knowledge, because it should actually be part of this topic that we are looking at. So I want to draw attention to something about something that I said. Last Monday, I shared this that I'm sharing on my screen, and most of you said, yes, you have seen this document. And it is this is a document which I believe most of you, if not all of you, would have. Right, forms and functions of the English clause. And this is what we are using to guide our interactions online. Now, if you quickly go to the table of contents, as you see here, Unit 1 is talking about the clauses. And for all the sessions that are Unit 1, we are basically talking about the main clause types. So there's the exclamatory clause, people call it exclamative clause, imperative, interrogative, declarative. If you read from the model, if you have it, from the textbook, you would not find this last thing that I mentioned about locution and elocution. You will not see it in there. But I wish it is something that you should know. That is why I have mentioned it to you. So the person who is asking, will the question be set from it? I cannot see, because I will not be the one to set the questions. But at least I can guide you to what to expect and how to answer and approach questions if they are asked. So that is just by way of informing us. We are moving to the second unit, Unit 2, which is the clausal element. And so we want to take time to talk about the various clausal elements that we have mentioned. And these clausal elements are the subject, the verb. Another name for the verb is the predicator, the direct object, the indirect object, the subject complement, the object complement. We talk about the adjunct. And then section 4 would present the prepositional complement. The prepositional complement is not really part of the clausal elements. Let us take note. Section 4, prepositional complement, is not really part of the clausal elements. And when we get there, I'll show you something. So the clausal elements are basically 5. The clausal elements are basically 5, which are the subject, the verb, also known as the predicator, the objects, the complement, and the adjunct. Note that The object can be direct or indirect. That's why you see direct objects, indirect objects. The complement can be subject complement or object complement. That is why in session 5 you see subject complement, object complement. And that is what you are going to talk about. In talking about this, there are two things that are very important or that you should keep in mind. One, the syntactic features. The syntactic features. And then two, the semantic features. So when you take the subject, we can talk about the subject based on its syntax. That's where the syntactic feature comes in. We can talk about the subject based on its semantics. That's a semantic feature. Before we go on, and like I mentioned, these are things that I know most of us have some knowledge on. Maybe you may just have forgotten. For which I mentioned that if I say something that goes contrary to what you know, please voice it out, voice it. And then we will try to discuss it and come to a finalization on some of these issues. But before we go into detail, so I'll stop sharing the book and then I'll go to the slides that are shared for you. But before I do this and we start with it, let me just ask us, what is the subject? Anyone to try? What is the subject?
Sir, please, a subject is the doer of an action.
All right, Augustina, thank you. Any other different view?
Sir, please, a subject is a group of words, noun or noun phrase, without a verb.
Okay. Josephine, thank you for that. Augustina, let me come back to you. Don't respond to the question I'm asking you, but just think about it and others. Augustina said the subject is the doer of the action expressed by the verb. Kofi is a boy. Kofi is a boy. I believe you all agree with me that the subject is Kofi. Is Kofi doing any action? Let's think about it. Is Kofi doing it? Let us not respond. Let's think about it. So what I'm trying to tell you is that, and that is why in our first interaction, I mentioned that in English, it is difficult to define because there will be question marks with the definition that you have given. And so we just try to talk about the thing. Now, okay, before I continue, Kate, your hand has come up.
Yes, based on, thank you for the opportunity. Based on your explanation, I wanted to also say that it is something or someone who an action is centered upon.
But even with that, it is just the same as what Augustina has said.
Okay.
He said an action is centered upon. Then he said, or something. What is that something?
Something inanimate.
Because if you consider the example, Kofi is a boy, we can't consider this something that you are talking about. Anyway, let's go on. Get to understand what I'm
Hello,
trying to
sir.
say. But Matthew,
Yes.
okay, Matthew, you can
Yes,
talk.
sir.
Then I'll respond to what Josephine said.
Okay, can I say that a subject is the person or thing that a verb relates to?
Okay, it is raining. It is raining. It is the subject. It's raining is the verb. Is there any relationship between it's raining and then this it's? Because that it there is not the pronoun it that we know. That it there is not the pronoun it. You see that we have it that refers to pronoun.
Yeah, that's a dummy pronoun.
That's a dummy. We don't even say dummy pronoun. We call it dummy it, like you are saying. It's dummy, but not necessarily a dummy pronoun. So the it's raining does not relate with the subject in any way. Benedicta, you can speak before I respond to Josephine's definition that she gave us.
Okay, so a subject to me is a noun, pronoun, or a noun phrase that performs the action of the verb or that the sentence is about.
Okay. I believe you would want to add more to it because you said noun phrase, or what? Pronoun, if I heard you well.
Yes,
That's what you said.
is a noun, pronoun, or a noun phrase that performs the action of the verb or that the sentence is about.
Do you know that an adjective can be the subject? Do you know that a prepositional phrase can be the subject?
Yes.
Do you know that a clause can be the subject? And so how you are defining it, there will be a question mark. Now let me go back to what Josephine said. Josephine said a subject is a group of words, if I heard there well, with blah, 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 without a verb. I remember that one very well, without a verb, because it's that I have a question mark on, without a verb. What do you mean when you say it is without a verb? Because I can give you a subject where there is a verb in it. For example, the lady who gave us that definition is called Josephine. The lady who gave us that definition is called Josephine. What's the subject of this sentence that I've given you? The subject is
The lady
the
who
lady
gave us that
who
definition.
gave us that definition. That's the subject. There's a verb in it. Yes, you talk about the verb as being part of the relative clause that is post-modifying lady. But there's a verb in it. But we are saying that it is a group of words, blah, 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 without a verb. All that I want to draw attention to, like I mentioned in our first meeting, is that in English language, we cannot emphatically say this term, this concept is this. Because whatever you say, someone would have a problem with it. But if you say, according to Markation 2026, a subject is a group of words, blah, 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 without a subject. That one, no one can take you on. That is what Markation has said. And so if you have any problem, don't come and fight with me. Go and fight with Markation because I'm quoting what Markation has said. And that is where issues of referencing comes in so that you would not to be have said to be plagiarized, copied. Right. So it is based on that. That is why we want to talk about the syntactic and semantic features of these elements. So that by using the syntactic and semantic features of these elements, the subject, the verb, the object, the complement, and then the adjunct, we would have talked about these clause types. You would have discussed them. And you realize that when you finish talking about these syntactic and semantic features, then you can now appreciate what a subject is, what an object is, what this is, what this is. Because like I said, Kofi is a boy. Kofi is not doing any action. And you see what Augustina said is not wrong, but we are saying it's not sufficient. What Josephine said is not wrong, but we are saying it is not sufficient. What Matthew said is not wrong. What Benedicta said is not wrong. All that we are saying is that it is not sufficient. And so we will need other things to come in to support what we are saying. And so usually when you want to define, if you want to actually define and say a clause is, a subject is, then after your explanation, give an example and use that example to support the definition that you have said or you have given, so that there will not be any problems. Right? So, and what Augustina mentioned importantly, most importantly, is what we refer to as traditional grammar. Traditional Subject. But see, Kofi. All right, so starting to mess up. Just as Isabella has typed in the chat box, our network is very bad. So I've just paused to get a strong signal before I can continue, because I have the indication here that my network is low. Unless you can hear me, then I can continue. So if you can hear me, let me see a reaction.
So we can hear you.
All right, so
now you went on about 2-3 minutes ago, so now there is clear.
Yeah, I realized, and I'm still getting that indication. That's why I am careful not to continue speaking so that you don't hear. But we can continue since you have given me the go ahead. So we will start by talking about the subjects, the verb, and then we'll continue. Let me also add that the things that we would say here would not be exhaustive. It will not be exhaustive. There will be more. In fact, you cannot find everything about a particular subject, about a particular topic in one document, in one book for university education. So usually for university education, we do not have one specific textbook. There are a number of textbooks that you need to read from different sources, put the information together, you synthesize them, and you try to make your own notes from that which you read and listen from different sources. Isabella, I see your messages in the chat box. Kindly also try to position yourself well where you are, because your colleagues can hear me clearly. Yes, if it goes off, I see that I've gone off. But also try to position yourself wherever you are. Thank you. All right, so we are talking about the subjects. And first of all, we want to start with the semantic features of the subject. Semantics has to do with meaning, right? Semantics has to do with meaning. So what is the meaning of the subject as we see it, as used in the clause or the sentence that we have? Basically, we would say that the subject is that functional category. So it means it performs the subject itself performs a function. The subject is that functional category. It means the subject itself performs a function. Subject is a function, but that subject also performs a function of the clause which something is predicated. In basic clauses of doing, the subject aligns with the semantic function of agent. So one of the functions of the subject is agent. An agent is what we all know, or most of us know. That is the one who performs the action. The one who performs the action. Right? That's what that one almost everyone knows. And that is why when I asked for the definition of the subject, the first thing Augustina mentioned was the subject is the one that performs the action expressed by the verb. Right. Now, aside we saying the subject is the agent, the subject performs other functions, and these functions are the semantic features of the subject. So one, the basic one, the subject is the agent. So in example number 1, as you see, Kofi kicked the ball into the net. Sorry, Jones kicked the ball into the net. Jones here is the agent because the verb is an action-oriented one. Then in number 2, the ball was kicked into the net. The ball was kicked into the net. You will see that number 1 is an active sentence, active clause. Number 2 is the passive form of this number 1. And that passive form, noun has the ball, which was otherwise the object in the first sentence, noun as the subject, right? Jones, subject, kicked, ball, kicked, verb. The ball is the object. But in number 2, the ball is now the subject. The ball was kicked by Jones, but you have removed this by phrase and then the Jones. So the ball was kicked into the net. Now the subject is the ball. What is the function of this subject? And we say that it is the affected. It is the affected. Right? 3, Tom saw a snake near the river. Tom is the subject. Here, Tom is not doing any action because C is not action or is not an action verb. Note, C is not an action verb. So we don't say Tom is an agent, but we say Tom is an experiencer. An experiencer. The secretary has been given some chocolates. The secretary has been given some chocolates by the manager. The manager is missing from the sentence. Now you see the secretary is the subject. The secretary is what? Not an agent because the secretary is not performing an action. The secretary is receiving an action. But you see this receiving action is different from if I say the secretary slapped the manager. So here, this secretary is the recipient. Is the recipient. So in these 4 sentences, we have seen 4 functions or semantic features of the subject as an agent, as an affected entity, as an experiencer, as the recipient. Let us note that this comes about because of systemic functional grammar. The affected, the experiencer, the recipient, amongst others that are there. So there are a number of semantic features. There are a number of semantic roles that the subject can perform. A few of them have been listed here: agent, affected, experiencer, recipient. Like I mentioned, what we talk about here, what you see in the model is not exhaustive. There are more. And I believe if I share that document I want to share with you and you do read, maybe not for the purposes of examination, but for the purposes of you getting the contents, the knowledge in the field, you'd get to know more features that are semantic of the subjects. So we are continuing. All right, Daniel, your hand has come up. You can speak.
Yes, please. What you are saying is it the case that if you look outside systemic functional grammar, these things we are looking at might be seen in a different way?
Yes. Outside systemic functional grammar, we would say most of the things that we were trying to say when I asked you what is the subject. One of the key things that you would mention is it is the receiver of the action expressed by the verb, or the one that is, it is the one who performs the action. Or like what is it Matthew said? Something that the is it the predicate talks about, or I think that's what he was saying. So outside systemic functional grammar, that is basically what we say about the subjects. That it is the one that performs the action, or it is the one that the other part of the sentence talks about. So Daniel, that is it.
Thank you, sir.
Susie.
Sir, please, I'd like to make an example and see if it fits here. If I say that the secretary was given a chocolate, can I say it is a recipient in the active clause?
Yeah, yes, is a recipient.
In the active clause, okay. Okay.
No, you see, what he said is not an active sentence. The secretary was given a chocolate. That is a passive sentence. It's not an active sentence.
Yeah, it was given. Yeah, it was given.
Yeah, so that is passive, not active.
Okay, the boy took a prize. Or the boy got a prize.
The boy got a prize. The boy took the prize. So you see here, the boy is the subject. What is its semantic feature? It is not an agent because it's not performing an action. Got the prize. It's not performing an action. It is not affected to. It's not an experiencer. Neither do I think it is recipient. Neither do I think it is recipient. The boy got. If you get something, the idea is that you are benefiting from it. So one of the things that has not been mentioned is that it is a beneficiary. So the subject can be a beneficiary. The subject can be an agent. A subject can be affected, experience a recipient. Like I'm saying, this is not exhaustive. There are more. And the more that are there, we can talk about beneficiary. We can talk about instruments. We can talk about goal. We can talk about location. We can talk about source, etc. For example, so see the example that you are giving, the boy will become a beneficiary. For example, this key, or yes, the key opened this door. The key opened this door. The key opened this door. The subject is what? The key, right? What is the semantic feature? What is the function of the subject? You cannot say it is an agent, because usually when we say something is an agent, then the agent should have human features. should have human features. It is the human that can perform an action. The key cannot perform an action. Actually, it is someone who is using the key to perform the action. So in this example, we say the key is an instrument. An instrument is one of the features. Instrument is one of the features. Again, the subject can be a location. It can be a location. For example, Accra is the capital, or let's say Accra is where I stay. Accra is where I stay. The subject here is Accra, right? Accra is not an agent. Accra is not affected. Accra is not an experiencer. Accra is not a recipient. Accra is not a beneficiary. Accra is not an instrument. So here we say Accra is a location. The same way, tomorrow is my birthday. Tomorrow is the subject. Tomorrow is not an agent. Tomorrow is not an affected. Tomorrow is not. So it depends on the sentence that you have and the meaning behind that particular subject. And so we can get different kinds of features which are semantic for the subjects. So that is it. Mimi, your hand is up.
Yes, sir.
You can speak.
Thank you, sir. Sir, please, when we look at the fourth sentence, the secretary has been given some chocolates. And you're saying the function is functioning, the secretary is functioning as the recipient.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So when you say somebody is a recipient, by extension, is the person not a beneficiary too?
Mimi, for now, I'll not respond to your question. Let's move on. You get to see a clear difference between the beneficiary and the recipient.
Okay. All right,
for now,
sir.
I'll not answer. Let's move on. You get it.
Okay. Thank you.
I get where you are coming from. Yes, by extension, there appear to be a thin line between the recipient and then the beneficiary, but there's a difference, and you see that as we move on. All right, so you can continue. So these are some semantic features of the subject. Like I've mentioned, here there are only 4. I would want to believe in the model 2, probably only 4 were mentioned. I would want to believe that. But as I say, when you get these textbooks that I would add to what you already have, you would find more of them in the textbook. So I've added a few to what is here. Aside we saying the subject is agent, is affected, is experiencer, is recipient. We can talk about the subject as being a beneficiary, as being a source, as being a goal, as being location, as being instrument, as being theme, etc., etc. Let's move to talk about some syntactic features of the subject. The syntactic features of the subject. And what are some of these syntactic features? 1, we say that syntactically in English, the subject must be present in declaratives, interrogatives, but not required in imperatives. Syntactically, the subject is present in declarative interrogatives. So when you have a declarative clause, the subject is there. When you have an interrogative clause, the subject is there. Let's add the exclamatory clause. When you add the exclamatory clause, the subject is there. The exclamatory has not been added here because most of the times we shorten the exclamatory clause. Most of the times we shorten the exclamatory clause. And so sometimes the exclamatory clause would not have the subject present. For example, what a game. What a shock. What a goal. That is exclamatory, but it has been cut short, so the subject and the verb are omitted. Probably that is why we don't see it here. But let us note that in the imperative clause, there is no subject. It is not required. So write this example. Write this example is an imperative sentence. Imperative clause, there is no subject. And so we can define the subject syntactically based on the declarative clause, the interrogative clause, the exclamatory clause, and imperative clause. And say that if you want to define the subject, then let us consider it in these clauses and say in declaratives, it comes first followed by the verb. In imperatives, it is absent. In interrogatives, it comes after the verb. Right? That is the most important syntactic feature of the subject. That's the most important syntactic feature of the subject. The others are just there to add up. So when two or more conjoined clauses have the same subject, all the subjects except the first one are ellipted. This is just a minor feature. So he came in, he sat down, and he took out a cigarette. Because the he referred to the same person, we can say he came in, sat down, and took out a cigarette. So the subject is ellipted, is omitted in the subsequent clauses other than the first one. Again, we can say the subject is that element which is picked up in a question tag and referred to anaphorically by a pronoun. The subject is that element which is picked up in a question tag and referred to anaphorically by a pronoun. So your brother is a sky instructor, isn't he? Because the he as a pronoun make an anaphoric reference to your brother, we say your brother is the subject. But like I'm saying, this is minor. We don't need it because if you consider the sentence or the structure, your brother is an instructor, which is a declarative clause, we would say the subject comes first, like we are saying. So your brother is the subject, right? Again, the subject is placed before the finite verb in declarative clauses and in questions where the WH element is subject. So everyone left early, everyone we know is a subject. Who came in last night? The who in this clause is a subject. Because if you respond to this question, we will say, Susie came in last night. And Susie is the reference for who. And so who here is the subject. Right? Other syntactic features. It is placed after the finite operator in yes, no questions. So in yes, no questions, the subject comes after the auxiliary verb or the main verb. So are you pleased with the results? You is the subject. Because it's an interrogative clause, it does not come first. Did everyone leave early? As interrogative, it comes after the auxiliary verb did. What film did you see last night? What film did you see last night? You is the subject. See where it is because it is an interrogative clause. Right. When did Sylvia get back? Sylvia is a subject. See where it is. So it depends on the clause type that you have for you to identify the subjects. Now the pronominal forms I, he, she, we, they are used to realize subject functions in contrast to the objective forms me, him, her, us, them, which are used for objects. However, you and it are used as subject and object. So basically here we are talking about the fact that the pronoun can serve as a subject. And this should have been talked about in sentence and its parts where we are looking at word classes. where you talk about pronouns. And for pronouns, we know that we have pronouns in the objective case, we have pronouns in the subjective case, and we have pronouns in the genitive case. So if the pronoun is in the subjective case, then we are using I, he, she, we, you, they, it. And that's what we are referring to here. Having mentioned this, we will need to look at what, so still going on the syntactic features, subject agrees with verbs in terms of concord. And in terms of concord, when a collective noun is used as a subject, the verb chosen can be singular or plural, depending on how the speaker perceives the collective noun. I'm sure if you have done communicative skills, you should have talked about concord there, where we say collective nouns can be singular or plural, depending on what you refer to as notional concord. All right. Subjects determine number, person, and gender concord, with the subject complements and the end of reflexive pronouns. So Jean and Bill are my friends. My friends is determined by Jean and Bill. She cut herself on a piece of broken glass. She is a subject, but it is determining the concord that it has with herself. Like I'm saying, all of these are minor features that you should know. Having mentioned that, we want to briefly look at certain structures, grammatical units that can serve as the subject. We know that basically the subject can be a noun or a noun phrase, right? A noun or a noun phrase. So cocaine can damage the heart as well as the brain. Cocaine is a subject. The precise number of heart attacks from using cocaine is not known. The precise number of heart attacks from using cocaine is a subject. Whereas number one is a noun, cocaine. Number two, the precise number of heart attacks from using cocaine is a noun phrase. So nouns or noun phrase can serve as subjects. Dummy it can serve as subjects. The dummy it is also referred to as empty it. Empty it. That it does not refer to anything. So it is nearly 3 o'clock. What is that it referring to? It is not referring to anything. It is just there to realize the subject function. It is raining. It is raining. The it is there to occupy the subject's position. Then we have unstressed there. There was only one fine day last week. There is a subject. There were only 2 fine days last week. There is a subject. We have prepositional phrases, we have adverbial phrases, like I was telling you when one of us tried to define the subject as a noun phrase, or a pronoun. So you can see the prepositional phrase can serve as a subject. Adverb phrase can serve as a subject. So typical prepositional phrase that is serving as a subject, forget the example that is here, is in the beginning was the word. In the beginning was the word. The subject of this sentence is in the beginning, which is a prepositional phrase, right? And then was is the verb. Will up in the front suit you? Up in the front is a prepositional phrase serving as a subject. Just here would be an ideal place for a picnic. Just here is an adverbial phrase. Among others, we have the finite clause. So clauses can serve as subjects. So we have finite clause, non-finite clauses. We have anticipatory it's serving as subjects. We will talk about clauses as we move on. That's the finite and non-finite clauses. So when you start talking about nominal clauses, we get to understand the examples that are seen under finite clauses and non-finite clauses. Then anticipatory it's serving as the subject. So these are some elements. That is not all, though, some elements that can serve as the subject of a clause or a sentence. So basically that's about the subject Then the next thing we talk about is the predicator, that is the verb. The predicator or the verb. So the predicator is the verb or the verb phrase. Okay, I had wanted to finish with this before questions, but since there's a hand up, let me listen to the concern. Yes, Mimi, you can speak. Or Mimi is the old hand.
Yes, sir, please. In the old hand, sorry.
Okay, then put it down. Otherwise your hand will pain you. Eva, you can speak.
Sir, please, can you throw a little light on the anticipatory it? Thank you.
Can you come again?
Please, I said throw a little light on the anticipatory it.
Okay. So what is the meaning of anticipate? The meaning of anticipate is what? To wait for, right? So when we have the anticipatory it, all that we are trying to say is that we are actually waiting for the subject. So the subject has been taken to the end of the sentence. So see the example that I provided. It surprised everybody. What surprised everybody? That he failed his driving test. So what you are saying here is that he failed his driving test should have been the actual subject, so that the sentence would have read that he failed his driving test surprised everybody. But we have taken this subject to the end of the sentence, and now we have surprised everybody that he failed his driving test. But the subject position needs to be occupied because this is not an imperative clause. And so we introduce this it. This it is not the dummy it that we are talking about. It is not an empty it. It's actually referring to something. And so this is an anticipatory it. Some people will also call it the anticipatory pronoun or it pronoun, because this it actually refers to the clause that is found at the end of the sentence, that he failed his driving test. For everyone to escape was impossible. It was impossible for everyone to escape. So that is the anticipatory it.
Thank you, sir.
All right. All right, so you can continue. So the predicator, as we are talking about, is the verb or verb phrase. And this predicator, which is the verb, is present in all major clause types: declarative, interrogative, imperative, exclamatory. There is the verb always present. Like I've mentioned earlier, it is the predicator that determines the remaining structure of the clause. It's the predicator that determines the remaining parts or structures of the clause by virtue of they being intransitive, transitive, or copular. So if you use a copular verb, another name for the copular verb is the linking verb, then what comes after it will be a subject complement. So Kofi is a boy. This is the linking verb. So a boy and Kofi are related. If you use an intransitive verb, we don't need anything to follow the verb. If you use a transitive verb, the transitive verb comes in different types. We have the monotransitive, the ditransitive, and the complex transitive. If you use a monotransitive, mono means one, so it takes only one object. If you use a ditransitive, di means two, so it takes two objects. If you use a complex transitive, that is where we have the object and then the object complement. Right? So this verb will determine the remaining parts or structures that the clause needs to be complete. Now let us note that this predicator, this verb, may constitute the whole of the predicates, where we have just the subject and the verb, or it can be a part of it, right? So you see, usually when we have a clause, when we have a sentence and we want to divide it, we say we have the subject and the predicate. The subject stands alone, but the predicate can be made up of the verb alone or the verb and other element. That's what you are trying to say. So the plane landed. The plane is the subject. Landed is the predicate, which is the verb, predicator. The plane landed on the runway. The plane is the subject. Landed on the runway is the predicate. This predicate is introduced by the predicator landed. Let us also note that the predicator function is realized by both finite and non-finite lexical and primary verbs. Lexical and primary verbs. Finite and non-finite. If you know the forms of the verb which I mentioned, the finite forms are usually the base form, the S form, and then the past form. And then the non-finite are the ing form, and then the ed, en form, which is a past participle, together with the to infinitive, and then the bare infinitive. And we are saying that the predicator function can be realized by the verb either in its finite state or non-finite state. The word is non-finite, not infinite. So let us not write infinite, it is non-finite. These are some syntactic features of the subject. Semantically, we say the predicator may represent any of the following. It can be a doing verb. It can be an experiencing verb. It can be a verb of being, doing, experiencing, or a verb of being. There are others that have not been mentioned here, but I believe for now this should be okay. Josephine, your hand has come up. You can
Yes,
speak.
sir. So please, with the predicator, as in the plane landed, and then the plane landed on the runway. If we underline landed on the runway as the predicator, are we wrong or correct?
Landed on the runway is not the predicator. That is the predicate. When you take the subject, whatever remains is the predicate. But in the predicate, we have the predicator, which is the verb. So if you underline landed on the runway, the whole of that is not the predicator. The whole of that is the predicate. But only the verb is the verb, which here we are referring to as the predicator. So Josephine, that is it.
Okay, so in the sentence we have the predicator and then the predicate. Within the predicate, we find the predicator.
Yes, within the
Okay,
predicates, you find the predicator. You see, when you have a sentence, when you have a clause, we say that there are two main parts. What are the two main parts? We have the subjects and the predicates. The subjects and the predicates. For every sentence, we have two main parts. For every clause, you have two main parts. The subject and the predicate. If you take the subjects, whatever remains is the predicate. In that predicate, the most important element is the predicator. Without the predicator, that is without the verb, we cannot get a predicate. Because you cannot say the plane on the runway and then you think that will be a full sentence. No. The plane on the runway will now become a phrase. But if you want to get a full sentence, Then if you have the subject, the verb should come. And it is this verb that will introduce the predicate. So that is it. All right, so we can continue. So we have talked briefly about the subjects. We have talked briefly about the verb. We want to move to talk about the objects, particularly the direct objects. And for this one too, we want to talk about both syntactic features and semantic features, as well as units, grammatical units that can realize this object function. That is when you are identifying something as the object, what should we expect? And so in talking about this, like I'm saying, the syntactic features and then the semantic features. So syntactic features, we say that the direct object, so we are focused on the direct object now. The direct object occurs only in transitive clauses with transitive verbs. Only in transitive clauses with transitive verbs. And you should know transitive verbs by now from sentence and its parts, where we're talking about verbs. And for this transitive verbs, note that we have three types: monotransitive, ditransitive, complex transitive. This direct object is placed immediately after the predicator or the verb phrase. So, I have sent the invitation. I is the subject, have sent is the verb, the invitation is the direct object. The invitation is the direct object. However, the direct object would follow the indirect object. So it means it will not come immediately after the verb. If we use a ditransitive verb, so it means that in number one up there, we are using a monotransitive verb. I have sent the invitation. But if you use a ditransitive verb which takes two objects, usually the convention is that the indirect object comes first, followed by the direct object. So I have sent everyone an invitation. I have sent everyone an invitation. I is the subject. Have sent is the verb. Everyone is the indirect object. And then an invitation is the direct object, right? So in monotransitive clauses, the verb comes immediately after the predicator. The direct object comes immediately after the predicator. In ditransitive clauses, the direct object comes after the indirect object. Right? That's another feature. 3, the direct object can be promoted to become subject in a corresponding passive clause. So in some cases, the direct object is the subject because of passivization. So I have sent the invitation. The invitation is the direct object, which is an active sentence, active clause. I have sent the invitation. But if you make it passive, the invitations have been sent by me. The invitations, which was the direct object, is now the subject. And so one way of testing for objects is to do passivization to see. So those are some syntactic features of the objects. Then some semantic features, that is functions that the object performs. We say the object can be an affected entity it can be an instrument, it can be a phenomenon, and a phenomenon is that which is experienced. It can be a range, it can be an affected. But this affected is more or less like a location, affected locative location, right? These are some semantic features of the direct object. So he headed the ball. The ball is affected because it will experience some form of pain, even though it is not human. So we say it is affected. The burglars used an acetylene lamp. Acetylene lamp. This acetylene lamp, which is the object, is an instrument to break open the safe. I felt a sudden pain in my arm. A sudden pain, which is the direct object here, is a phenomenon. He gave the door a push. A push is a range. And we are saying the range is a nominalized extension of the verb, where we have nominalization. Nominalization. Then he swam the channel. He swam the channel. The channel, which is the direct object, is the affected locative. Is the affected locative. Daniel, your hand has come up. You can speak. Daniel, you can speak.
I would like to ask, when we were dealing with the object, you did mention that there are some verbs that are considered maybe transitive or intransitive. I would like to know whether we should depend the verbs that we are to name them, whether as a transitive or intransitive. We should depend on context, or we can pinpoint directly that this verb is a transitive or intransitive verb.
Okay, so sorry for the question that you're asking, Daniel. There are some verbs that are prototypically intransitive. There are some verbs that are prototypically linking or copular. But for the transitive verbs, you cannot say this verb is a monotransitive, a ditransitive, or a complex transitive, unless, like you are saying, it is used in a context. So for most of the verbs, context will determine whether it is monotransitive, ditransitive, complex transitive, or in some cases, intransitive. But there are some verbs, like I'm saying, that are prototypical. For example, cry. Whenever you use cry, it will become intransitive. Whatever that will follow the verb cry will be an adjunct, which is not compulsory. Because you can't say, I cried a cry, for it to become a monotransitive verb. For example, sneeze, blink, yawn. So some verbs are typically intransitive verbs. When you use them, it is only the subject that will go with it. But there are some verbs, when you use them, you would need either one object, you will need either two objects, or you will need an object and a complement to complete them. And that is where the context that you are saying would come in. For example, I made breakfast this morning. I made breakfast this morning. The verb used here is what? Make. In this sentence, depending on its usage, make is a monotransitive verb because it takes one object. I is the subject. Made is the verb. Breakfast is the direct object. This morning is an adjunct, adverb of time. If I say, I made her breakfast. I made her breakfast. Her here is an object, but here is an indirect object. And then breakfast will become the direct object. That same verb, make, made, can be used for us to get an object and a complement that follows it. So, I made him angry. I is the subject, made is the verb, him is the object. Angry is telling us more about him, so to become an object complement. So you see one verb, but it is monotransitive, it is ditransitive, it is complex transitive, depending on how you use it. So Daniel, that's a response to your question.
Thank you, sir. But I heard you say blank. Blank, is it transitive or you did mention say it's some sort of intransitive?
Well,
If I could,
usually, yeah, okay, so he blinked his eye. Okay, so blink can be monotransitive. But
okay,
usually verbs that relate with behavior, so we call them behavioral verbs or verbs of behavior, are considered intransitive, like sneeze, yawn, weep, cry, cough. They are purely intransitive verbs.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I can continue. So we move on to look at some structures that can serve as the objects. And the structures that can serve as the objects, basically we have pronouns, nouns, noun phrases, which we can all attest and agree with. I don't understand it. It is a pronoun. I bought oranges. Oranges is a noun. Have you read that new novel I lent you? That new novel I lent you is a noun phrase. Anticipatory, it's the same as anticipatory to talk about. I find it strange. What do you find strange? That she refuses to come. So it is making a forward reference to that she refuses to come. That's anticipatory. It's I would prefer before noon for a meeting. Before noon here is a prepositional phrase serving as a direct object. A hand has come up. Let me finish with this, then I would respond to, I'll call you. So a prepositional phrase can also serve as the direct objects. Aside that, we can have clauses serving as direct objects. And for the clauses, you can talk about finite clauses and non-finite clauses. I would also say that when you get to talk about nominal clauses, you understand all of these. So just observe the examples here. When you get to nominal clauses, they will come up. So that is something brief or small on the direct objects. Mark, your hand, Daniel, your hand came up. You can speak if it's something new.
I saw something on the slide before this one. If you
Okay.
kindly. Yeah, the third point. The underlined words. Is it noun clause or noun phrase? Looking at the structure.
Have you read that new novel I lent you? Is it the one you are referring to?
Yeah, yes, please.
That is a phrase. It's a noun phrase. The head word is novel. The head word is novel.
Mm-hmm.
This novel is pre-modified by the adjective new. And then we have that, which is a demonstrative determiner, like this pen, that book, those boys.
So I could see that there is a subject in it and also a verb. I learned.
No, the subject and the verb that is in there is a relative clause. That is post-modifying novel.
Okay.
You should know this from your sentence and its part class where you talked about the noun phrase, where we have mentioned that the noun phrase can have post modifiers and the post modifiers can be a relative clause. And note that for the relative clause, they can be introduced by what you refer to as the zero relative pronoun. So I lent you is a relative clause that is introduced by the zero relative pronoun. The sentence could have read, have you read that new novel that I lent you? But you have removed the that because it can be omitted. So zero relative pronoun. So that is a noun phrase. It is not a clause.
Okay.
If it is a clause, that is one thing we'll talk about. If it is a clause, what type of clause is it? It will be a nominal that clause because it's introduced by that. And one thing about the that clause is that when you remove the that from the sentence, from the clause, sorry, when you remove the that from the clause, whatever remains is a full form sentence. When you remove the that, whatever remains is a full form sentence. For example, look at this. They fear that there may not be no survivors. That there may be no survivors is a nominal that clause. Let's focus on just the clause. Remove the that. You will see that we have a full sentence. There may be no survivors, which makes complete meaning. Let's go back to the example before this. That new novel I lent you. Remove the that. You have new novel I lent you. That does not make a complete thought. So that is not a sentence. In that case, this is not a clause. It is a phrase.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right, you're welcome. Susie, you can speak.
Okay, sir. My question is, can a relative clause stand as an object?
No. No. The relative clause only post modifies, so it can't be an object. The object position is occupied by nominal clauses, as we talk about when we move forward. So no.
Okay. Okay. Because I was thinking of something like I took what was given to me.
Good.
I
took what was given to me. What was
Yes.
given to me is a nominal clause that functions as an object. What we will talk about as a nominal relative clause. That is different from the relative clause, which is either restrictive or
Okay.
non-restrictive.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. We can continue, right? So that is the direct object. We want to move to the indirect object. Daniel, is this the old hand or a new hand? Daniel Obin, Mr. Obin. I see your hand up. Is it the old one or a new one?
This is the old one, sorry.
Well, then put your hand down. Otherwise, your hand will pain you. All right, so we are moving to the indirect objects. Mimi, after we have finished talking about the indirect objects, you would get to understand the distinction between the beneficiary and then the recipient. So take note of that.
All right, then.
All right, so like we have been doing, we talk about semantic features, we talk about syntactic features, and we talk about elements that can serve as the indirect object. So starting off with the syntactic features, we say that the indirect object occurs only with ditransitive verbs. The indirect object occurs only with ditransitive verbs. So if the verb is not ditransitive, you can't get an indirect object. And such verbs take two objects. So they include verbs like, sorry, they include verbs like give, send, buy, etc, etc. But note, like what is Daniel asking? These verbs are not specific to ditransitive verbs. If I say I bought fufu yesterday, buy there is a monotransitive verb, right? But what you want to say here too is that you can use such verbs to form sentences where you get an indirect object and then direct object. So these indirect objects would often come in between the verb and then the direct object. So I sent them a fax. I sent them a fax. I is the subject, sent is the verb, them is the indirect object, a fax is the direct object. Note that we could have just said, I sent a fax. I sent a fax. And in that case, it becomes a monotransitive verb. In that case, it becomes a monotransitive verb. Right. So basically, that is the indirect object syntactic features. There's not much to say. And then its realization, it is typically realized by a noun, a noun phrase, a pronoun, and we can get clauses too. We can get clauses, but typically that clause is a nominal relative clause, what some people refer to as WH nominal clause. But its name is nominal relative clause. When we move to talking about nominal clauses, we find examples here. So basically, that is the indirect object. Some semantic features. Semantic features. The indirect object is associated with two semantic rules. Either it is a recipient or it's a beneficiary. Either it's a recipient or it's a beneficiary. Both recipient and beneficiary indirect objects have an optional prepositional phrase. An optional prepositional phrase. What you want to say is that this indirect object can be introduced by a preposition. If the preposition that introduces the indirect object is to, then its semantic feature is recipient. If the preposition is for, then its semantic feature is beneficiary. So consider examples 1, 2, 3, as against 4, 5, 6. Let us take notes that usually in English, when we have two objects coming in a sentence, in a clause, that is the direct and then the indirect objects, the convention, the rule is that the indirect object should come first, followed by the verb. That's the rule of English. So the doctor gave the injured man oxygen. The doctor gave the injured man oxygen. What I'm doing is to give the actual sentence for sentence number 1. The doctor gave the injured man oxygen. But we can change the positions of the direct objects and then the indirect objects. When we change the positions of the direct object and then the indirect objects, the indirect object noun is introduced by a preposition because we cannot say the doctor gave oxygen the injured man. We can't say that. Neither can we say number 4, I will buy drinks you all. No, we can't say that. We need a preposition to come. And we say when we use the preposition to, then it means it's a recipient. So if it is to, it's more or less like the thing is going directly to the person. If it is beneficiary, it's like the thing is not directed to the person, but it is around the person. So the person benefits from it, right? And that is the difference between the recipient and then the beneficiary. They appear to be the same, but no, they are not. So the doctor gave oxygen to the injured man. He got the ticket for us all. For us all. He got us all the tickets. He got us the tickets. I will buy you drinks. I will buy drinks for you all. So that is the two main semantic features of the indirect object. Then we can talk about realization, which I've already mentioned. They are typically realized by pronouns, nouns, noun phrases. We can get prepositional phrases. We can get clauses. We can get clauses as indirect objects. So in example 1 is a pronoun that is serving as the indirect object. In example 2 is a noun phrase that is serving as an indirect object. In example 3 is a prepositional phrase that is serving as an indirect object. In example 4 is a clause that is serving as the indirect object. So that is something small on the indirect object. Any questions? Yes, Mimi.
Yes, sir, please. I would like you to go over the difference again. The beneficiary, you're saying that when it is for, the
Yes.
beneficiary is when you use for.
When we use for,
That is,
yes.
it means it's not directly to the person, but around the person.
Something like that, yes.
And what of the recipient? That is when you use the to.
It's more or less like, that's when we use the to. So the receiver gets whatever thing that is being talked about. So the person more
Directly.
or less, yes, directly has a physical hold. Let's put it that way. Of the thing that is the direct objects that is being talked about.
Very well said. Thank you.
All right, so we are moving on. We have talked about the subject. We have talked about the verb, also known as the predicator. Talked about the direct objects, the indirect object. Let's talk about the complements. The complements. And the complement for the complement to, we have the subject complement and the object complement. The subject complement and the object complement. So we first of all talk about the subject complement, and then we talk about the object complement. What's the subject complement? Basically, we know that the subject complement tells us more about the subject, right? Basically, the subject complement tells us more about the subject. So we say the subject complement is realized in a clause that has a copular verb. When you want to get a subject complement in a clause, in a sentence, we need a copular verb. And a copular verb is also known as the linking verb. The most typical copular verb is forms of the verb to be. So is, am, was, were, are examples of linking verbs or copular verbs. We have other examples, as you will see in the examples that are provided: appears, became, feel, smell, tastes, etc., etc. are all examples of linking verbs. So she is a student. She is a subject. This is a linking verb. A student is telling us more about she. It appears interesting. It is a subject. Appears is the linking verb. Interesting is telling us more about it, the subject. That is why it is a subject complement. She became a tennis champion at a very early age. A tennis champion is the complement telling us more about the subject she, because the verb became is a linking verb. Feel free to ask questions. Free to ask questions is the complement, complementing a subject which is missing, because the example in 4 is an imperative clause or imperative sentence, right? So we say that the subject complement does not represent a new participant. It rather completes the meaning of the clause by adding information about the subject. And there is typically number agreement between the subject and its complement, as well as gender. So she is a student. She singular, a student singular, because you can't say she is students, right? So there is concord between the subject and its complement. There's agreement between the subject and its complement in terms of number. We can also talk about it in terms of gender. So Janet isn't herself. You can't say Janet isn't himself, because there will be no agreement there in terms of gender. Right. Then the last point here, complements of the type a good couple. In the example, Joan and Lionel make a good couple are explicable on semantic grounds, couple being inherently plural in meaning. So would go to suggest that it is singular. And so Joan and Lionel should probably have been couples if you're talking about this agreement, but we are saying that they are explicable on semantic grounds, because inherently the word couple, even though it appears singular, is actually made up of two individuals, two people. The hand is up.
Yes, please. Yes, please. You did talk about copular verbs, so you have learned about it right now. The copular verbs are they different from the stative verbs? I would like to know the difference between the two.
Okay. Copular verbs are not the same as stative verbs. I don't know what you did in the sentence and its parts, but I'm sure you were told in the sentence and its parts that there are different classifications of verbs. The main classifications of verbs are two. One is the auxiliary verbs, and then 2, the lexical verbs. That's the main verbs. You know that an auxiliary verbs, you have 2 types. You have the primary auxiliaries and then the modal auxiliaries. Let's forget that. For the main or lexical verbs, we have different classifications. These different classifications are 3 under main or lexical verbs. 1, we consider the forms that the verb take. By form, we are looking at the base, the S form, the past form, the ing form, and then the past participle form. As a result of that, we have regular verbs versus irregular verbs. So regular verbs will follow all the 5 forms doggedly. Irregular verbs will not follow all the 5 forms, particularly when you talk about past and past participle. So the past tense of put is still put. The past participle is still put. The past tense of eat is ate, different from the past participle eating. These are irregular verbs. Then we have regular verbs. The past tense of walk is walked. Past participle, walked. The past tense of jump is jumped. Past participle, jumped. The past tense of pull, pulled. Past participle, pulled. So that is one classification when we are looking at main verbs, regular versus irregular verbs. Then we have another classification where we look at the elements that follow the verb. When you are looking at the element that follow the verb, that is where we talk about intensive and extensive verbs. I don't know if that was mentioned, but under intensive and extensive verbs is where we talk about the transitive verbs, whether mono, di, or complex, the intransitive verbs, and then the copular or linking verbs. When you talk about this classification, you are looking at the elements that follow them. When you are looking at regular versus irregular verbs, we are not looking at the element that follow them. We are looking at the form that the verb will take, particularly paying attention to the past and then past participle. Then we have the third classification. The third classification is where we have the dynamic versus static verbs. Dynamic versus static verbs. And for this classification, it comes about because we are looking at whether the verb accepts or takes ing ending or not. And so there are some verbs that do not take ing endings. There are some verbs that take ing endings. verbs that take ing endings are called the dynamic verbs. Like go, going, sleep, sleeping, eat, eating. And verbs that do not take ing verbs are what we refer to as stative verbs. For example, resemble. I resemble my father. You can't say, I am resembling my father. No. You can't say that.
Sir, please, how are they called?
They are called stative verbs. Stative verbs. Those are verbs that do not accept ing endings. So, Daniel, stative verbs are not copular verbs, but we can find some examples of copular verbs under stative verbs. That does not mean that they are so. So I said it is an irregular verb because the past tense ate is different from the past participle eating. But it can still be seen as a dynamic verb because you can use it in the ing and say eating. You see, so that is it, Daniel.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
So we can continue. to talk about realization of the subject complement. You have mentioned that it is realized in a clause that has a copular verb. You have mentioned that it does not represent a new participant, but it completes the meaning of the clause by adding information about the subject. You have mentioned that there is agreement between the subject and this complement, either in number and then in gender. So we want to look at the element or the unit that can serve as the subject complement. Before we do that, Thomas, you can speak.
Please say.
Thomas, if you are speaking, we can't hear you.
I want to find out why imperative sentence that we looked at in the previous slide. Phil, can you hear me, sir? Hello, sir.
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you.
I want to find out why the imperative sentence that reads, feel free to ask questions. That one we use an exclamatory mark, not a full stop. I want to know why we have done that.
Thomas, like we have already mentioned, the imperative clause should end with a full stop. But if you end the imperative clause with an exclamation mark, it is not wrong. So we can end imperative clauses with exclamatory marks for certain stylistic purposes. For certain stylistic purposes or for certain effects. But don't be a habitual use of the exclamatory mark at the end of your imperative clause. That is all that we want to say.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Percy, your hand is up. You can speak.
Yes, please, Doc. Please, I would humbly suggest that we wrap up because it's time, since we will be meeting you tomorrow in the evening. It's a humble suggestion, though.
Let's finish with this slide that I've projected and then we'll wrap up. So realization of the subject complement. The subject complement can be realized by usually adjectives. So he is good. Good is an adjective. This is beautiful. Beautiful is an adjective or adjective phrase. That is so important. Adjective phrase. That is very wonderful. Adjective phrase. Noun phrase. She is 22 years old. That is a noun phrase. Right. So the adjective phrase, the noun phrase can serve as subject complement as well as clauses. So we have finite clauses and non-finite clauses. But like I've always been saying, when you get to clauses, these things will come up. When you start talking about nominal clauses, they will come up and they would appreciate them better there. So that is the realization of the subject complement. Quickly, we want to talk about the object complement and then we'll call it a day and meet tomorrow. So like the subject complement, the object complement will complete the meaning of the clause when it talks more about the object, right? When it talks more about the object. And this object complement is placed immediately after the object. It is placed immediately after the object. And it is used with complex transitive verbs. Let us take note. It is used with complex transitive verbs. Example, find, make, appoint, nominate, elect, vote, etc., etc. All of these are examples of complex transitive verbs. So you are making me angry. You, subjects, are making, verb, me, object. Angry is telling us more about me. So it is an object complement. I find this topic interesting. I find this topic interesting. I, subject, find, verb. This topic, direct object. Interesting is telling us more about the topic, so it is object complement. Ghanaians voted Mahama president. Ghanaians, subject, voted, verb. Mahama, object, president, telling us more about Mahama, so object complement. The class appointed Mercy class rep. The class, subject, appointed, verb, Mercy, object, class rep, telling us more about Mercy, so object complement. So that's the object complement. Typically, the object complement must agree with the object in terms of number, just like we said for the subject complement. There should be agreement. So you can't say circumstances have made the brothers enemy. You can't say that because brothers is plural, and so there should be a plural of complement for they to agree, for them to agree, enemies, right? However, there are exceptions. The exception that we saw in they make a good couple and subject complement, that same exception is coming here because inherently that element is considered plural. So, however, there are exceptions to this, especially in expressions of size, shape, color, height, etc. As in, you haven't made the sleeves the same length. The sleeves is the object. The same length is the complement. You see, sleeves is plural, but we don't say same lengths. No. Right. In terms of, so these are, all these that you are mentioning are typically syntactic features. In terms of semantic features, the object complement can characterize the direct object by a qualitative attribute or by a substantive attribute expressing the name or status of the object reference. So the object complements semantically gives an attribute, just like the subject complement, but this attribute can be qualitative or substantive. Police found the suspects unwilling to cooperate. Unwilling is a qualitative. They have elected Ken captain of the golf club. That is a substantive attribute, not a quality, because at a point in time, it can leave. Then realization of the object complement. The object complement can be realized by an adjective, as you see in number 1. It can be realized by a noun phrase, as you see in number 2, the underlying structures. It can be realized by a nominal relative clause. This is more specific, a nominal relative clause, as you can see in the underlying structure. And then it can be realized by some noun phrases that are introduced by preposition. So we will say prepositional phrases, as you see in the last 2 examples. Party members regard him as the best candidate. The as is part of the best candidate. So we say that's a prepositional phrase. Do you take me for a complete idiot? A complete idiot is a noun phrase, but because of the form, we'll consider that to be a prepositional phrase. And so these are some realizations of the subject, of the object complement. We are left with the adjuncts to talk about, and then the prepositional complement, which I mentioned that is not really a part of the clausal element. So we will shelve that for today. And then tomorrow when we meet, we will talk about that and then move to another topic. Any final questions, comments, issues for clarification? Joseph, you can speak.
So please, number 4, no underlined group of words.
So the authorities had the demonstrators placed under house arrest. Placed under house arrest will be the underlying structure, which should talk more about the demonstrators. So it should be placed under house arrest, which is a clause. All right. Susie, your hand has come up. You can unmute and speak.
Sir, please, can you say for the first one, or on the second, can you say party members regard him the best candidate?
Yes, you can delete the as and say party members regard him the best candidate.
Thank you. So, sir, if so, then would you still consider that to be the preposition, acting as preposition or prepositional phrase?
So the point here is what? Object complements realized by noun phrases are sometimes introduced by prepositions such as and then for, right? If a noun phrase is introduced by a preposition, the preposition forms part of the phrase now, and so it now becomes a prepositional phrase. If you remember your sentence and its parts, phrases, prepositional phrase, we will say the structure of a prepositional phrase is a preposition plus either a noun phrase, a noun clause. So I believe, or a pronoun. I believe in you. In you is a prepositional phrase. In and then you pronoun. I believe in Kofi. Kofi is a noun. In preposition. I believe in the student. The student is a noun phrase. So party members regard him as the best candidate. We should have actually underlined us as part of the best candidate so that would be the full prepositional phrase. But we are just making you understand that that's a prepositional phrase, and then us is the preposition. That's the noun phrase, and then us is the preposition introducing this noun phrase. All right, Thomas, your hand is up. You can speak.
Sir, please,
Yes, Susie, go.
Yes. So I don't think my question has been answered.
What was the question?
Yes, I was trying to mean if there isn't any us, or for the second one, if there isn't any for, and you say party members regard him the best candidate. If you say this, would you still say it's since okay, then let me put it this way. Since there isn't any us, it wouldn't be considered as prepositional phrase. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Mimi, you can speak.
Yes, I had wanted to ask, since when Susie asked the question and he said she asked if the as is not there, can it be deleted? And he said yes. And I was going to ask if the as is taken away, then it will rather be a noun
yes.
phrase. Yeah.
Yes.
And she came back with that. So I think it's another. Thank you.
All right.
So, sir, it means that in that case, in every time the preposition should be added to the noun phrase, as in should be underlined as part of the noun phrase, so that it will be more clearer.
Yes, exactly.
All right, sir. Thank you.
All right. So if there are no further questions, comments, or issues for clarification, we would bring our interaction to a close here. And then we would, as agreed, continue tomorrow, 6 to 9 p.m. Right. Okay. Enjoy the rest of the day.
The slides, we have only units 1 and 2. That's what I have anyway. I don't know that of others. Thank you.
That is what I have shared. The others that I have, they are not, they are more or less like summarized slides. So you would not get full, should I say full sessions where there is session 1, session 2, session 3. I've just collapsed them into one. I'll share that too for you. Joseph, Joanna has come up.
Okay,
Please,
thank you.
having the lessons in the evening, I think we've been having network problem. So I'm just suggesting an earlier time, like before 6 p.m.
An earlier time, like, so is it possible we can all agree to meet, let's say, from 4? That's what Joseph is saying.
Sir, or 3 will be okay, sir.
4,
3,
please.
when are we closing from work and you are saying 3?
3. 4 is okay. 3, dear, aren't they?
4.
All right. So we are meeting tomorrow at 4 instead of 6. All right.
Okay, thank
See
you,
you
sir.
tomorrow then.
Thank you so much.
God bless you.
Please, oh, Madam Mercy, please, can you send the link to, I don't know whether there's a close WhatsApp group. I'm not on it, so I don't have the slides I was talking about. If you can share it on the oral or contemporary so that I join, please.
I think it's already in the oral group. The link, the clause and function link is already in the oral group. So you can check.
Okay, thank you.